Hi, everybody. Welcome to episode 2, Socratic Satsang. Have we peaked or are we progressing? Presence as a simplistic yes or no question, but it's far from that. Have we peaked or are we progressing can be asked about morals, financial systems, economic systems, equality, opportunity, resources, assets, science, production, evolution, much more. How far along have we come? That's the question. Opening this topic is Simon. Over to you, Simon.
Thanks, Finn. Okay, I'm gonna roughly try and stand in for what my friend George, I think, was probably trying to propose with this topic, which George often likes to talk about Nietzsche, and like I've learned a bit from like reading him a bit. And one of the things that he kind of like talks about is this idea of decadence in society, and that for well, like that's like a term used by lots of like folks, but like Nietzsche, that's like a little bit more like of a not necessarily kind of good or bad in terms of like ethics, but more just a kind of amoral idea of the will to power. And that for Nietzsche, who was a massive classicist, he kind of feels like societies like kind of ancient Greek societies and things like this had this much more like direct connection with like will to power, their like will to power, and they didn't sort of like concern them necessarily themselves with other things that for Nietzsche kind of degraded society. So it started off with Plato and his kind of ideals of like Platonic ideals that kind of created this idea of a Hinterwelt, which is just this kind of supernatural perfect world, and that then after that, kind of Christianity comes into play, and that for like Christianity, he critiques as kind of being like a slave morality in the sense of like it's not a morality in which it is a good thing to necessarily express your will to power. In fact, it's like you're expressing an idea of kind of yeah, like that Jesus basically like isn't a good teacher to teach us like what it means to express our will to power. And so that basically kind of society progresses and has got worse at this idea of kind of um yeah, embodying our will to power as a society and as a people. So I don't necessarily agree with it, but that's I imagine what George was getting at with this topic.
Thank you, Simon. Who would like to go next? Yes, Karen.
I just wanted to relay a story that I experienced way back in my mid 20s. It would have been in the mid 80s. I was attending a Christmas party, and one of the guests there and I got into a discussion about um, whether, you know, science, the knowledge of the human body had stopped and there's nothing more to learn. And I took objection to this, not knowing that what my medical situation be like. I guess 30 years later, and it was interesting that there was no way I could convince him that no, we're just beginning to learn about things and how to cure various diseases. In 2015, I was diagnosed with a rare, incurable but treatable uh, bone marrow cancer, and when I was diagnosed, the uh, hematologist slash oncologist told me that look, there is no cure right now, but they're working on it, and maybe someday you'll just get diagnosed and you take a pill and you walk out in a week and you're done, you're cured. And I said, well, that's nice and fanciful. I know you're trying to pump me up after getting leveled by this prognosis, but in the past few months, been following the medical journals that have been coming out on the research of this disease, and there are signs of actual encouragement that uh, what I thought 9 years ago, I thought there's not going to be a cure in my lifetime. There might be, and with the science and the dedicated doctors and researchers that are working away on this rare disease is I don't feel discouraged. I feel hope, and hope is if you follow the movies, hope is a good thing. And I'm, you know, I still have a 50-50. I don't think it'll be cured in my lifetime, but there's a 50% chance that I feel hope and it could happen. And that's why I think we're still improving, at least in the medical side or the science field. Thanks.
Thank you. That was inspiring. Thank you. Who's next? I can share a couple of thoughts. When this question comes, have we peaked or are we progressing? Have we peaked as a species? I don't think so. I think we're as a species, we're brand new. We're just starting out. We're barely 100, 200,000 years old. Next, as in terms of as a civilization also, we are still violent. We are still figuring out things like economic systems. We are still dealing with issues like mortality. We are still figuring out how to extend life, how to create synthetic organs, or how to travel to space. Then the question comes to other issues like, what about, have we peaked in morality? I have no clue. But I feel that we are just somewhere in the process. What about economic systems? Capitalism, communism, is whatever we have, socialism. Is this the final end product? Is this how the civilization is going to continue for the next thousands of years? I don't know, but I hope not. One thing I have noticed about our species is that we are ambitious. We are ambitious, we are driven, we need to dominate every issue, everything that's around. So progress, I believe, will not stop. So I don't think we are anywhere near our peak. I think we're just getting started. That's my thought. Gagan, go ahead.
Yeah, just to add to that. Then I think we are very brand new, and I think sometimes looking at society and looking at where we are in society, it can, from the microscope, look like that we are declining. But I think we work in maybe a cyclical fashion where we're learning, we're forgetting, and remembering. Kind of in a cyclical fashion, and progressing forward. It's almost like if you look at maybe a stock market or something, like a graph, like the peaks and valleys. Maybe 20 years ago it was kind of at the midpoint, and it's going through those motions, but it's progressing upwards, and I think that's just the pattern of how we're growing right now.
Yes, Tulip.
What I believe, this is my view, like life in general is cyclical. There is no one peak. What is peak today becomes normal tomorrow. That's how I view
Love
life in general.
Thank you. Denise?
Thanks, Vin. So from my perspective, I agree with what everyone is saying, that we're progressing in some areas, but not in others. And as a civilization, we're kind of in a state of duality, if you will. Technological and scientific progress, huge, absolutely huge. Just like Kevin mentioned, medicine has had huge advancements. Increased life expectancy, cured diseases, enhanced quality of life for people. The breakthroughs in, AI, biotechnology, space exploration. I mean, look what we can see on the James Webb telescope. It's just incredible what we can learn about our universe. Where I feel that we haven't really progressed too much is the forgotten or dismissed ancient wisdom that we have access to if we kind of open ourselves up to it. And that is, ancient civilizations had advanced energetic or non-material technologies that we have yet to discover. Exploring archaeological and metaphysical evidence that points to sophisticated understandings of the universe and energy and consciousness. Things like the pyramids, sacred geometry, vibrational resonance, those types of things. So much like what Tulip said, when we speak about progress, it always seems to be linear. But I think we're missing a deeper truth here, that history is actually cyclical. And many ancient cultures spoke of progressions through the ages, from golden ages of heightened awareness and unity to darker, more materialistic ages. So from this view, I see it as we may not be forging ahead as much in this area, but slowly almost reawakening. So kind of climbing on the back of towards knowledge once held, but since forgotten. And so, looking at kind of what this means for our future, or sorry, I was just going to say the kind of gap between the consciousness and connection. Despite all that technological evolution, many people now feel more disconnected and anxious and isolated more than ever. Social media has connected us digitally, but not emotionally or soulfully, really. And our relationship with nature, intuition, and each other has weakened in key ways. And so highlighting a lack of spiritual and energetic progress. But that's not to say that many cultures and communities around the world, that hasn't been lost or diminished. They're flourishing, right? So for when I see our future, what I'm hoping that that we're just in a phase of kind of remembering or realigning and reintegrating that ancient wisdom with modern science. And I'm hoping that the next evolution is not necessarily industrial or digital, but energetic, spiritual, and collective in nature. And that's my hope. So I guess we'll see.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you, Denise. Drake, over to you.
I think a lot of the things I'm going to say sort of reflect what's already been said, but I'll just phrase them a little different, perhaps. As Denise mentioned, there's all sorts of things with civilization that have gone on where pyramids were built. We lost that knowledge. This has happened several times in different things. We've had civilizations like the Roman Empire rise and come to greatness and fall. We've risen to a certain point. There's some turmoil. Where we go from here, who knows? But there is a lot of this rising and falling, but I think it's slowly on the pattern of slowly building on it and continuing to rise. And I think we're going to continue that. For how long, who knows, until perhaps there's some sort of natural disaster or we have one of our own. That's the civilization side. And have we peaked as humanity? When you look at it, we've come to about a maximum lifespan of 122 years, I think is the oldest for a woman, and 116, I think it is for a man. And it's sort of started to level off. For a while, it was less. And then after the 80s, it started to level off. And we seem to have reached a maximum lifespan unless we get to the point where there's some sort of new medical developments. But at this point, there doesn't look like anything that's going to extend that. The same thing with height. Height actually in some African countries, it's been going up everywhere for years and has leveled off, peaked some African countries because of malnourishment, and that the average height is starting to shrink. Part of this is also being blamed on pollution, global warming, all these other environmental factors. So is it possible we're getting to a peak there? Maybe. But when you look at the technological side, the things that are happening there, with AI, and when you look at things like Neuralink that Elon Musk has got, and there's other similar brain computer interfaces being worked on that allow people who can't move limbs to do that. And they're looking at getting more and more advanced on this. And eventually, it's possible that we will have this link to an AI right direct to our brain and almost evolve into another species. There will be the humans who may die out because they aren't advanced enough as everyone else is that has these implants. That's one possible scenario. It could be far in the future or never happen. But I think we still have potential to grow. How we do it, and if there's the possibility of that or something that interrupts it, like I say, a disaster of some sort, we don't know yet, but we live in interesting times, that's for sure.
Thank you, Drake. That was lovely. We have a response from Gagan.
To add, maybe, and just ask everyone on this panel here tonight, where are we progressing to? Where are we growing to? Like, where is the peak, if there is a peak? Like, where are we going to? If we are cyborgs and everybody can do a somersault and we talk about, I work for a corporation every quarter. We talk about growth. Where are we growing to? Where?
Okay, we've got Kevin, Drake, David, and Simon lined up. So let's go with Kevin.
Leaping from the medical field into religion now, the Buddhist teachings that I was taught was that we're all on a road to enlightenment. That's, I think, is what we're supposed to be going to, just to be enlightened enough so that when we transition to the next form, we will have achieved, achieved nirvana. That is one of the religious things. As for how you're doing in your quarter, it's nice, but it's not as spiritual to me as Gagan is he's on his path. And tonight I'm interacting with 9 other people who are on a different path, but it's kind of nice to learn from each one of these 9 different paths. And I think I'm closer to enlightenment because of this. That's it.
Thank you. Drake, please.
Yeah, just responding to Gagan's question of where are we progressing to, I think that's something that the only way we find that out is by progressing. I don't think we can control so much where it is, because each thing we do as we progress changes our options for the future and where we're going. We may think we're going in one direction, but some of the evolution of what happens as we progress could take us in a totally different direction. So it's been that way since the beginning of man, when they started with fire, right? They had no idea that they needed fire or what it would do for them. And all of a sudden they have fire, and now they're progressing. They're able to cook things. They're able to burn things. They're able to harden things. So I think it's good to wonder where we're going and look at possibilities, but I think it's very hard to predict that.
Thank you, Drake. David?
Yeah, I think my views probably align mostly with Kevin's. Gagan, you mentioned the kind of mirage of relentless growth. And I would say we should be trying to aim for wisdom. Wisdom is slightly different than being just knowledgeable. It's probably something to do with the recursive and relentless application of reason. Vinod, in the initial question, was talking about if we've made intellectual growth. Intellectual is one of the kind of key dimensions of analysis. And whilst I definitely acknowledge we've made incredible material and scientific leaps forward. In terms of ostensible intellectual growth, it's really been kind of aggressively commodified. A degree now seems like a ticket to a white-collar job rather than a duty to any kind of development of wisdom. And it's much more about signaling than it is about wisdom. So if I had to choose a trajectory for humanity, I would go with wisdom. I don't think you can get to a more peaceable conclusion for a set of ethics without the recursive application of reason. So,
Thank you, David. Simon?
Yeah, cool. Thanks, Ben. Okay, so I'm going to try and wrap together a bunch of stuff that's being said, but also kind of shift the conversation maybe in a slightly different direction, in the sense of when I was reflecting on this topic, a big thing that came up for me, just kind of having very similar reflections as to kind of lots of different folks in the group, is that like there's a lot of contradiction at play. And then I remembered kind of ideas of like Zizek, who I definitely mentioned last week, and is like a bit of a fave. And yeah, basically he's kind of makes this point that when there's kind of contradiction at play, like often that's a sense, like that's a good indicator that maybe our ideology is like coming into play. And I would say that the fact that like we're now starting to get ideas of like wisdom and enlightenment as like core ideas, you can see that like basically probably how we're going to chart this question is like based on our kind of like ideologies that we hold kind of like dear and close to us. And I definitely think this is where like Zizek has a pretty interesting idea of what like ideology is, which is like basically a kind of tweaked version of kind of a Marxist idea of false consciousness, which was kind of fun because it tied into like last week. So basically it's just like kind of like a construct that basically is imposed by like Marx kind of thought it as like a construct like imposed by the ruling classes to kind of help the working classes basically with their kind of inherent lot in life. And that basically Zizek just like alters it by kind of saying, yeah, but also like we kind of like willingly partake and help construct these ideologies. And that also like the solution to all of this isn't that we can just kind of miraculously kind of take the lens off and see the kind of objective truth behind all of this. Just as a like concrete example, what I thought really kind of brought home this idea in a very like real way that's kind of going on right now is like kind of tech, right? When kind of big tech wasn't big tech yet, but was like startup tech, then like, you know, there's this idea that like there could be an app for everything that would like save the world. And we still got like a bit of residue of that, but now we're kind of really starting to see kind of a lot of dystopia and like nothing's actually that great. And I would say a lot of that was very predictable back when all of this stuff was happening. Why? Because of capital, right? Like the people that are going to have successful kind of app-based projects and do kind of cool things in kind of the online space were going to be people who had capital. And that follows very predictable. Like we know what that looks like and what those patterns are. And yet we kind of like collectively sold ourselves this idea that we're progressing, like this is going to take us to a new peak. And, you know, there's definitely some ideas that it can. And like, I don't want to kind of like completely dismiss that like these technological developments aren't significant in their own right, but just that like there is a lot of extra baggage that we have around kind of looking at this idea of like progress, and like tech is just like one example. But yeah, like I think a lot of this of like our relationship with progress is going to be like very much guided by like ideology. And I do think like Marx has a point that it's just like to kind of help the plebs like accept their law in life.
Thank you. There's a response from David.
Yeah, just when you got going there, Simon, you just made me think immediately of the Hegelian dialectic, where the masses are kind of pacified with the notion that worrying about trajectory is not their concern. That's something for the ruling elites, and get back to the factory. I don't know if that's what you're kind of alluding to, or there's something deeper there.
I can have you respond, yeah, just that like maybe that is even a bit more pernicious than that, in that like we have an illusion that we're also partaking in the direction that all of this stuff is going in, and that like, you know, these ideas of progress, we can be like, oh yeah, there's cool apps, and that's like, that makes me feel good that we're progressing, whereas really what's happening is just kind of a raw expression of capital, and that like that you actually have very little say in how we're actually like charting a course forward, but like we just kind of collectively kind of pretend that we are, because that makes us feel a bit better about ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, I'd even take it one stage more abstract than that, or several stages more abstract, if you like. Beyond capital, there might be an idea that you've got some kind of democratic leverage, which is kind of hard to see in action. And then I guess your subject last week kind of began to touch upon it, but the degree of personal agency that you've really got can itself be questioned. None of us kind of chose to be here. We were all kind of thrown into life. We certainly didn't choose the bank account that we were thrown into life with. So really, we might not just be at the kind of winds of mercy of capital, but really at the winds of mercy of evolutionary space.
Thank you, David. Kevin?
Then before you accuse me of throwing a hand grenade into the discussion, I'm going to throw Denise under the bus. She's the one who dropped in AI as part of her discussion. And I said, I think I can now with Simon and the technology. I think we're at a crossroads with AI. I think we've seen, at least I've seen on YouTube now, it's you could use AI to have a leader of any political science, and they can say or do something that looks like they actually said it or did it. And I used Drake's suggestion when I was trying to write my own intro to run it through an AI and see if you can improve it a little bit better. And there's also the use of AI in medicine, saying, all right, we've got all this data from experiments or research that sometimes failed, sometimes succeeded. What's our next point of action? What pathway should we go in research? So we're at a crossroads, and hopefully we're going to be good people about this and actually use it as a constructive tool in our future. That's it.
Thank you, Kevin. I'd like to loop back to Georgie. I'll just come to you, George. I'd like to loop back to Gagan's question about where is all this going, and of course there is the possibility that we'll just blow ourselves up and obliterate everything. There's also the possibility of the Earth doing something catastrophic and wiping us out. But if none of that happens, I like to believe that we will figure things out on how to get along without killing each other. I think that we'll learn to travel in space. I think that we are going to start colonizing space just like we colonize the Earth. I believe we will try and work towards extending human life as much as possible in any way possible. That is, if possible, just through medications, synthetic organs, turning into cyborgs with certain prosthetics. We are, in a way, cyborgs even now. It's just that the cyborg part is external in our hand. But otherwise, we have this portal with which we are connected 24/7. I see us even being able to upload maybe personalities, memories, experiences, learnings. And I think that our rate, the acceleration rate of our progress, I think is just going to keep getting faster. At some point in the future, I think we live in these huge cities or spaceships and travel to other planets and mine or just colonize. And that's what I see as a future. Not a very happy one, but I'm sure it'll be nice. I saw a few hands up. I think I saw Gagan first, and then David and Abhinay.
Yeah, Vin, I'll just quickly comment on you. Listen,
Sorry, yours is a response to me, or
yeah, yes, it is. Yeah, I'll be quick. Yeah, I'll just say that Vin, you listed some great technology investments that human beings will be able to do, but what is the purpose? I guess what I'm trying to get at maybe is, what is the purpose of all this abundance? Like, what is the meaning behind it? It is what I'm trying to get at, and I mean, this could go back to how I'm wording this out. Can go back to our greater topic is have we peaked? I'll just maybe briefly that's written by, if you've heard of the book *Sapiens* by Yuval Noah Harari. He just briefly touches on advancement of human species, and give you a quick summary. He does mention that maybe we're probably happier back in the hunter and gatherer days, and once we started to settle with agriculture and started to develop tribalism and things like that, it started to kind of go downhill as humans. So it's great that we're advancing. We're having all this abundance. We might be able to go to space and colonize, but with all this abundance, what is the meaning behind it? What is the purpose?
thank you, Gagan. I've got George, David, Abhinay, Drake, Tulip. Have I left anyone out? Okay, so over to George.
Yeah, thanks. Apologies for being a little bit late. I may have missed some of the opening statements. I joined when Drake was speaking, I think. I think Gagan, me and you are pretty aligned on that in terms of what you just said. I think that a few thoughts I have about progress in general. The first is that everyone has a slightly different idea of progress, and that what people's idea of what progress means for the human race kind of reveals quite a lot about them as a person, and the things that they value in human beings. And so it's always interesting to hear about what people see as human progress. None of that's to say any of it's bad, but I think it's just a revealing topic. Secondly is that, yeah, I'm glad that I haven't heard much about quantitative measures of human progress yet. I'm quite against that. Things like life expectancy or the number of people in the population, stuff like that. I really don't think that those are, just because they're quantifiable doesn't mean that they're measures of progress. If you think about civilizations that have come and gone, no one really cares about how many people were in the Mayan Empire, say, or no one really cares about what the average life expectancy of the Mongols was, So I don't think that those quantitative measures are a good way to sort of see how much progress is going on. Which then kind of leaves the question, well, what is progress? I think that's kind of what it comes down to. And I guess I'll reveal my cards here, which is that I think it's ultimately aesthetic stuff. It's kind of what you can produce as a culture, and then what you can sort of bring forward into the future as your output of a culture. That can show itself in different ways. And some of that can be scientific in a way, but I think that sort of seeing things on an aesthetic level is, to me, the sort of output of what progress is. I do agree with Drake in the sense that things just kind of keep happening, and that humanity is in a kind of constant becoming. I wouldn't call that progress, though. I would call that becoming, that we never actually reach a final goal. There's just this constant turning and churning, and we're kind of caught up in that. But it's kind of, can we create a straight line through that in any kind of way? And I think that straight line is aesthetic at the end of the day.
Thank you, George. That was revealing. I felt embarrassed when you said the whole personality comes out. I was like, oop, I don't know how much I gave away. David?
Yeah, that's ditto. And that's awesome about aesthetics. I also agree that would be a huge signal of success. Just going back to your point, Vinod, yeah, I mean, it's an incredibly salient question to dwell on, particularly at the moment, poignant even, because the dimensions that you kind of defaulted to there are naturally material and scientific, because those are the ones that we can readily grapple with. And in those dimensions, it's just been like a hockey stick graph over the last 100 years. Meanwhile, in more sophisticated dimensions, like a spiritual dimension, things have become so fragmented. It's you might as well average that to be a kind of downtrending line. I mean, spirituality has suffered greatly at the hands of materialism and reductionism over the last 100 years, and it does kind of feel increasingly like we're at some kind of a interesting tipping point. On one hand, we could be incredibly optimistic about the scientific, material, and say the health-focused future, but on the other hand, there seems to be many aspects of our beings which are being starved of spirituality, moral progress, aesthetic progress, which George was saying is all too an important indicator of progress. So I mentioned the intellectual perspective there. Obviously, the material perspective is up. The intellectual perspective is kind of changed. There hasn't really been much progress there. Spiritual seems to be down. Moral seems to be down. But the more ways that you analyze the question in different dimensions, you realize really what's going on is a massive split, like a huge bifurcation of everything being pulled in different directions, a huge fragmentation. And that seems to be causing a corrosive burden to the societal brain, if you like, the hive brain. And so that is the reason that I would be inclined to use recourse to wisdom, use recourse to wisdom, because it is based in scientific thinking, following a scientific method. But even if you say, for instance, trace deeply into physics at the moment, physicists are getting so damn near the bottom that there's almost pivoting into spiritual dimensions. Like if you step into string theory from the depth of kind of quantum theory, you get into a pretty spiritual kind of domain. So it seems like there's a lot at stakes here. There's a lot up for grabs. And while I'd like to go with the flow and be super optimistic and say, yeah, things are going to be great, we can even spread out through the galaxy and Alpha's on the up and up, and possibly intelligence is possibly on the up and up. It does seem to be at the expense of these other aspects, and I really think that we need to reconcile them. And it's doing things like this, digging deeper into philosophy, that gives me pause for hope.
Thank you, David. Okay, over to Abhinay.
Thank you, sir. I think the majority of the topic has already been very well brought out, but I would like to reiterate. I think that the human species is still progressing as a overall species, and mentally, technologically, ideologically, we are still evolving. And those are other than the mental and the ideological phase, there are certain aspects where we are regressing biologically. I think we have already we have tipped our bodies, and we are on a regression, and we really need to gym. Really need to work out for 2-3 hours to stay fit, other than doing our routine work, and other aspects such as spirituality and morality and ethics. It is a space we've either regressed, or we are either finding ourselves again. I think I'd agree with Denise on that. We are either reinventing ourselves, or we have either regressed to a point that we have to find ourselves again. And where why all this is not led to a civilizational collapse as in the past, the answer may lie in globalization and technology. I would like to think that it is that we are so well interconnected now. We are so connected to each other that a collapse or a fallout in a certain place doesn't lead to an overall collapse as a civilization, because we are a complete global society. It is not as in the past that a civilization collapses and the entire world collapses. We are so well connected that it is either a complete collapse or no collapse at all. And I think I would like to say the same one.
Thank you. Drake?
Yeah, just sort of responding to the ethics, spirituality side of things. Certainly with morals and ethics, you can see how those have changed over time. And a lot of times we tend to look on what we started out growing up as to be the moral place to be, and everything goes to hell in a handbasket as you move forward. And I'm sure this has been going on for many more generations than any of us can count. So our views on these things evolve the whole time we move forward. So it's hard to say if we're progressing or not, because in our eyes today, we may not be. But in the eyes of someone 2, 3, 4 generations from now, maybe we are the peak, right? Because they see it locked in that time. And then the same thing with spirituality. Depending on how you look at it, there's going to be a lot of people that say that it's good that we're moving away from that and more into the hard science area, and not relying on spirituality, because there's so many things that are more up in the air. There's no way to definitively prove these things or beliefs, and they're so different between different groups, right? So I think it's very hard to lock in and say, right now we are the best, or the generation just before us was. It's a thing that you have to take a historical perspective of and look back over time and see where we've gone and where we're at, and try and isolate yourself from thinking about where you are at this moment, but look at how the whole situation has progressed and where we may be moving to. Anyway, that's my further thoughts.
Thank you, Drake. Tulip?
This is when you spoke about the future and said that it'll be nice, but we won't be happy. Did you say that?
No, I did.
Okay, I heard you say that it'll be nice, but not happy. So I wanted to know why.
No, I didn't say we won't be happy. I said I'm not presenting a happy picture.
Correct. Okay. I wanted like to clarify.
Well, sorry about that.
No, I mean, okay, thank you. That's it.
I meant that I wasn't going into the happiness and the
Yeah, got it.
helping each other and all. I was just focusing on the tech and
Partial.
the autistic part of the future.
Yeah. Interesting.
Would like to go next? Yes, George.
So, okay, forewarning you that I do have to bring Nietzsche into all these conversations. The way that he would look at all this. So I think a way to conceptualize whether we're progressing or not is to think about what we're evolving into. So his concept of the overman was kind of like an open question about what a human being is going to look like in, let's say, 100,000 or 1,000,000 years. And is that direction that we're going in now in terms of that evolution one that we can be proud of, or one that we are sort of degrading in? So in the same way that like we look at a chimpanzee and see like how far we've come from a chimpanzee, is kind of like, where are we going to be going evolutionary wise? And so I think Abhinay's point in terms of that biologically we are kind of degrading is an indication there, right? Like, we're eating sugary foods. We need to brush our teeth every night to get off all the sugar, or else our teeth will degrade. We need to exercise and stop sitting down. We're getting fat. We're getting diseases that are because we're chronically overweight. If we're keeping going in that direction for the next 100,000, 1,000,000 years, what's a human being going to look like? And maybe that's an indication of whether we're progressing or not.
Thank you, George. Yes, David.
Okay, well, I was just going to come back to Abhinay's point there, which I guess in turn comes back to your point, Vinod. It's more of a delicate time than I think we're giving weight to there. Because of the explosive technical growth, we're sitting on an array of very dangerous toys. So there was an author called Nick Bostrom. I think he's a researcher. He's possibly in Oxford, but he wrote a book where he produced this analogy that we as a human race were essentially coming up with inventions, and he imagined that as a black bag, and we would reach into the black bag and we'd pull out various balls, and there could be a white ball, a gray ball, or a black ball. And so far we've been picking out white balls and gray balls, and the white balls would represent things like scientific advancement, oncology, penicillin, things which generally made life better. Gray balls would be things like perhaps the combustion engine, various aspects of industrialization, sanitation, and so on. These are things which are really pretty hard to say. These are fine things, but there's kind of pros and cons. There's possibly pollution, inequity, and so on. And then technology has given rise to the very viable possibility of complete nuclear annihilation. And then more recently and increasingly, the possibility with mechanisms like CRISPR for viruses to be weaponized and directed or targeted at very specific cross-sections of humanity. Now, these are things that have come along because of the hockey stick explosion in technological progress. And these black balls represent something that it is very well worth being extremely worried about, and not necessarily presuming a rosy future. In fact, not necessarily assuming a future at all. Hence why I think it's definitely worth pursuing at an expedited rate a pursuit of wisdom and a development of ethics and a growth of frameworks which might regulate some of the more dangerous parts which are sitting there just waiting to annihilate our future.
Thank you. Wow. Simon.
I guess like a couple of things sprung to mind. I'll try and kind of string them together in fairly quick order. One, just I wanted to kind of quickly point out that like virtually every generation has thought that like they're going to end everything, and that there's like some kind of like limit that we're just kind of like pushing on, that like if we go too far, like everything's like messed up. I'm not like, while I definitely see that like modern kind of life is, we now have to kind of like deliberately exercise and stuff like that. Like there's also a lot of like positive medical outcomes that have like we've done, and like we're living in like kind of healthier bodies in lots of ways. Not that that necessarily corresponds to like progress. Like but that like I think in terms of just like, for me, this is where maybe it does come back to like a Marxist point of view, even though that I'm no Marxist. But I do find that like a lot of these like conversations that often like have, when kind of, to kind of George's point before, where like they do really expose like a lot of kind of how we view the world and what we value. And like ultimately with any kind of consensus that we reach to try and kind of like promote these ideas, like do we want like a wiser, more compassionate world, like that all sounds like really good kind of thing, but in any way to like achieve that, I feel like we like by necessity come back to needing to change our economic system, and that like I'm not necessarily going to kind of like put forward an idea of like what that should look like or things like that. But I do feel like if you want there to be more compassion, if you want there to be a different way that things are valued, if you think that like our spiritual kind of dimension is being degraded, and we're overworking, like these are all questions that to me start coming back to kind of what are the, like it's I don't think it's good enough basically just to say that we should focus on wisdom or we should focus on that, because I don't quite have enough confidence, and maybe it's just being a millennial, coming into the adult world after 2008, but like a lot of these kind of kind of like shaping of kind of the world you think is going to go one way, and then it really like even obvious lessons don't seem to be learned kind of thing, and a lot of that seems to be a kind of adherence to the same kind of economic paradigm. So I just think that like change in terms of evolving towards the ultimate human form that we want to kind of like be in, if that's kind of an idea of progress we're going to kind of rally around, then that we need to start kind of, I think, going beyond ideals and to kind of actual kind of how does this materially come to be.
Thank you, Simon. Yes, Abhinay.
Just a small quote I'd like to add. Something which I read very long time back. I don't remember the scientist who I'm going to quote, but the quote went like that. The scientist was asked that if interplanetary beings were ever to visit this planet, and you could only ask them one question, what would that be? And the scientist replied that I would ask the alien species that how did they manage to survive their own intelligence, progress to the state where they manage interplanetary travel, and use that intelligence to survive and thrive. I think that may be an answer for us also, that if we can manage to counter our own intelligence, which ultimately in scenarios leads to our own downfall, it may be a viable solution.
Thank you. David?
Yeah, that's really interesting wording. Surviving your own intelligence. That's a curious thought. Yeah, a few thoughts about the dyad between quality and quantity, or qualification and quantification, or aesthetics and quantification. Yeah, it's because everybody has got a subjective opinion, essentially, about what the future should look like. It becomes a massively difficult coordination problem because it's so fundamentally fragmented and subjective. But we do have some kind of white ball tools at our disposal. And I'm reluctant to name drop AI because there'll be something in that domain where an incredibly huge amount of hopefully debiased wisdom could direct something that starts democratically but basically has its rough edges rounded off by a kind of relentless polishing by an intelligence that is higher than our own. That might be one way through a mess, but it does also signal that we're at an incredibly curious time where philosophically hard and fast rules like the Humean ought is divide begin to be bent, and I truly hope they can be broken. So the human autism problem is science and a recursive search for truth can tell us what is. It can give us facts, but it can't tell us what we ought to do about it. Essentially, everybody could come up with their own value system, and some of those could be incredibly, nihilistic or mystical, or pick your dimension. But some of those value systems have got a broader utilitarian applicability than others. So if I want to enjoy a masochistic value system, well, that wouldn't be viable in a broadly applicable sense. And I would hope that we could architect a future using an intelligence that is better than our own, and certainly better than any one democratically elected officials, to ensure that the ethics system that we choose going forward, which we're probably going to spread out into the wider space, is optimal. Vinod.
Thank you, David. Tulip, was
Sorry.
who'd like to go next? Right. Yes, George. George, followed by Denise, please.
Just a quick response to David's point. I think that's definitely an interesting idea. I disagree with it. I think the ethics systems come about naturally, almost like I was saying last week, unconsciously. It's a way that a group of people figure out a value system which helps them survive in the current moment, which is why ethics and morals is a constantly evolving process, almost like as a genealogy of morals. So I don't think we can rely on an AI system to code as a sort of, idealized ethic system that we're all going to follow. That's just something that goes against human nature. And I think that it's like, while I respect where you're trying to go with it, I think that inherent within that thought process is a kind of a self, or like a shame in humans, and like looking for computers to overcome what like humans lack. And I think that that's something that at least I try and avoid in my personal philosophy.
Thank you, George. Denise, please. And then we come to you, David.
Just so many different perspectives here. So, been jotting down some notes, just hearing what everyone's saying and resonating with quite a bit. It's so tough when you're talking about human civilization as a whole, when if you just look at the circle around you and how people, they make conscious choices. I mean, it's sad to say that en masse, I think people are driven, the human race is driven a lot by fear, and the choices we make are take that into account. And there's the easy and convenient way. And I see that a lot where it's just, I think it was George that talked about sugar. And that's very interesting to watch. You look enough at social media and you see all these little TikTok videos and what people are eating and what they're doing to their bodies. Yet at the same time, in the same breath, wanting to live a long, healthy life, but there's a contradiction there. And then, there's choices people make that where they help themselves, right? Where they're being true to what they're trying to accomplish. So it's tough to look at humanity and just kind of blanket a civilization and say we're going in this direction or that direction. Some people love AI. In fact, the sad thing is, and I know Kevin said that he was challenging me a little bit on AI, because I had said initially that is a huge leap for mankind by way of progression. And it is to some degree, but there's a dichotomy there, because of course there's the flip side to that as well. And I don't want to bring pop culture into this, but you see movies like Terminator from years ago, or we're talking about implanting memories and things like that through a movie like Total Recall, right? Like those movies were made so long ago, yet people have fears now around what could happen with that. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that there's a lot of fear that's still instilled in kind of the global consciousness, and to be able to move away from that is not so easy for a lot of people. A lot of people, if we look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, a lot of people are sitting in that bottom level of the pyramid, just trying to survive and just trying to, curb their anxiety, curb their fears, and make it through the day and make it through their lives. So, anyway, just some thoughts there.
Thank you. Thank you, Denise. Over to you, David.
Yeah, I would concede that I was kind of being somewhat facetious there, because I definitely do recognize it as being a truly intractable coordination problem. Like we would all have to decide on the AI, for instance. And so it just doesn't really work. And so in that regard, and I do recognize its infeasibility. And so that leaves me personally with another option. And that's to, instead of hoping for things to change in the outer world, but rather kind of look inwards and take a deeper dive into, if not necessarily a spiritual domain, certainly as dive as deeply into an internal philosophy as I possibly could, doing the best I can with what I've got to make my subjectivity as reasonable as possible.
Thank you, David. Who would like to go next? Yes, Simon.
Oh yeah. So I'm not normally a fan in any way of kind of putting up too much walls between kind of science and art kind of thing. But one distinction between the sciences and the arts that I've found pretty instructive over the years is this idea that and I think that scientific knowledge is basically knowledge that we can pass between generations and that you can stack on top of one another. Whereas really the arts is what every generation has to learn for itself. And I suppose when I look at it from that perspective, I think it applies to progress in the sense of we can often be pretty angsty as a society, kind of worrying about kind of how certain things like ethics or stuff like that isn't progressing kind of very fast. But then I wonder whether that's really what comes back to kind of, I think what Tulip and Denise kind of said about a lot of this stuff's very cyclical, and I with I think knowledge that's connected with the arts and is more about kind of how are we going to potentially decide, if we did want to implement an AI, I'm not a big fan either myself, but if we did want to do that, right, we would need to all kind of collectively decide kind of thing. And that's going to require some ethics, and that's probably going to require us to look more to a kind of what this generation has learned for itself about kind of compassion and about justice and a whole bunch of fun stuff like that. So I do think there's I guess rather than looking at the totality of human knowledge and kind of is this all kind of progressing, I do think it's kind of roughly useful to kind of split into kind of what's actual stuff that's kind of going in a straight line, the sciences and stuff like that, versus what generationally do we have to figure out for ourselves kind of thing. And I think we should treat those a bit differently, as much as I love connecting science and art together.
Thank you, Simon. Tulip, was your hand up?
No, I'm just going to adjust the
David, over to you.
ratio on this.
Yeah, no, I appreciated that, Simon. I very much agree with that too. I guess the last thing that was on the list of dimensions, Vinod, which we kind of touched on, which is some of a elephant in the room, would be economics. I just wondered if you had any thoughts on that. I know you and I have previously had quite an interesting conversation on that before, and just wondered what your thoughts were, or anybody else in the room had any development on the economic aspect.
Anyone else to answer or step in?
Yeah, I'll just say bringing economics into this, we sometimes mistaken growth of capital for growth of character. But comfort isn't without courage, and wealth isn't without will. So I wouldn't take these as signs of progress, but maybe symptoms of I think what Simon and George have been talking about the Nietzsche philosophy, but maybe symptoms of decadence.
Thank you. My thoughts on economic systems would be that we've explored communism. We found that it didn't work in its pure form, or whatever form was implemented by the Soviets, a couple of other countries. We've explored, communism, though, is working pretty well in China, from what I understand. Capitalism has done extremely well in the West. It's taken us far ahead of everyone else. Mixed economies have some greater growth rates than most of the other countries. So I think we're still evolving. And it's not just a blanket system. There's also the cultures, what is acceptable. Like some cultures just reject the concept of interest, whereas some cultures survive on interest, right? Or they thrive on interest. So we've got to accommodate every type and just figure out how to go ahead. So I think we're just evolving. And even when I said earlier that I think we'll figure out a way to stop killing each other, I think that'll happen after a lot more death takes place first. So it is just part of our journeys where I think we're at. Though I also have a more bright or optimistic outlook. I think in terms of our health, while obesity and other issues are real, heart issues are real, all these issues we spoke about are real, previous generations faced other issues. And some of those, like hunger or starvation or famine, which most of us are completely unfamiliar with. And when you go back historically, I know that people say we lived many years, but from the time it's been recorded, our longevity is increasing. Poverty is reducing. Hunger across the planet is reducing, or rather, I'd say death through starvation. So there is progress while there is lack of progress also. And even the number of questions we are all asking, such deep spiritual, philosophical questions, are being asked by commoners like us. That's probably because we are comfortable enough to be able to ask such questions. So that's all I have to say. Thank you. Yes, David.
Where to start there? That was a strangely quite a beautiful tour of economics. It's like an idea that we could find something between all of them, which is quite a nice idea. You did mention that this is an interesting thing, but health has got two dimensions to it. There's a quality of life, and then there's a quantity of life. And so life expectancy is a interesting figure to latch onto. And I think it was Simon or George was mentioning earlier on about just being a bit wary about kind of quantization of qualities. So I would just flag that as a highly abstract thing. The second thing you mentioned there was to do with death, and just with regards to the current state of the world, ego is in such an acute state. It's so heightened, it almost matches everything in the kind of hockey stick graph of technological evolution. I think we could be entering a new kind of Holocene where in millennia they dig us up and they realize that we were half made out of plastic and we'd been messing with our appearances so much that they'll call us the Ego-cene. But the idea of ego death is quite interesting to me. We spend a lot of time, the very nature of a kind of completely fractured society is the idea that there's us and them, there's me and somebody else, there's my ego and their ego. And it's all curiously driven by an amplification of ego rather than a mitigation or nullification of ego. And so that is my abstract interest in using another entity, an entity that might have some degree of sentience and consciousness, but is not imparted with ego, which could be used as a intelligent agent to make a more informed and less egocentric decision. Just one thought there.
Thank you. Yes, Simon.
Yeah, well, I guess what if we're gonna get into the ego, then it definitely like brings me towards like like the super ego and then the like id kind of thing. And like as much as like I think like Freud was like full of a lot of like BS in lots of different ways, I do quite like the id, the ego, and the super ego. And like my understanding is like what like super ego is like your mum and dad, or just kind of like these like higher up kind of voices in society telling you what to do exactly. It can be kind of society. Then your ego is kind of like how you're projecting yourself. Then your id, like your kind of like more kind of like animal, like raw self kind of thing. And like, yeah, I definitely, I do think there's a lot to that like ego death in terms of just like, I've been having a bit of fun with like previously doing some like Wim Hof stuff of like cold water dipping and just kind of, and also just like when working out, of just kind of like super getting into just kind of like not being embarrassed about making kind of loud grunting sounds and just like, just fully just like, I don't know. I do think that there's something quite cool about like shifting our perspectives around like out of just this kind of like day to day kind of how we're presenting ourselves, and like what things that we can learn from kind of, I don't know, when the super ego and the id kind of get together, like fun, weird stuff happens kind of thing. Often quite like destructive stuff. But like I do also think there's the potential for some fun stuff. And I think after those like ego death experiences that are a bit more kind of meditative or kind of like kind of deliberate can often be your kind of super ego guiding you to try some kind of higher state that you want to attain, but kind of like processed through a bit more of like an immediate kind of like I'm just an animal kind of in the present moment kind of thing. And so yeah, that's just kind of what that makes me think of.
Have you done the ice bath thing? Have you gone full Wim Hof?
So me, George, and his wife would cold dip here every day for a while. So yeah, we
Hell yeah,
took it natural with the ocean on our doorstep kind of thing.
that's amazing. You're in the right place. That's cool.
Yes, George, I was also thinking, I mean, we had discussed in the beginning that the person who suggests the topic that gets voted gets a chance to open it. Since we missed that opportunity with you, maybe you'd like to do the conclusion also today.
Sure. I mean, I think there's been a lot of great points here, and a lot of really thought-provoking points that I hadn't really anticipated going into this conversation. So I appreciate a lot of the directions that this has been going, like economically, psychologically, discussing the role of science in whether there's progress or not, which I'm kind of mixed about. Part of me is like, yes, part of me is like, no. So I think we've covered a lot of really good ground here today. And yeah, I really appreciate the discussion. I think, yeah, the point I was going to make was to go back to my earlier point in terms of where are we evolving into, and thinking about that from a psychological perspective as well, right? Like we have evolved psychologically massively since we were monkeys. And where are we going in that direction? And yeah, in a million years, are we going to look back and think, how far have we come? We were just stupid creatures back in 2025. Or are we going to sort of be monkeys again and sort of have completely degenerated. I don't know the answer to that. I obviously hope that sort of Vin's vision of the future, where we're an interplanetary species, we heightened sort of intellectually and scientifically, and that we live in harmony, is achieved. But I don't know if I have assurances on that. For some parts of it, I see that we're going in that direction. Massive advancements in science, big advancements in quality of life. In other ways, I see as just treading water and potentially slowly running out of energy and sinking. I think going back to Drake's first point, or when I entered the conversation, it's an interesting topic to think about, but ultimately, like, we're in this huge process of constant becoming as a species. And personally, I think, going through life is a constant becoming process. And I think that's the best way to put it, because it's hard to put a value judgment on becoming. Some ways we're getting better, some ways we're getting worse, but we're getting different. So I guess that's the concluding remark from me.
Lovely. Thank you, George. Any other conclusive thoughts from anyone you'd like to share, or shall we wrap this up with George's conclusion? Okay. Thank you, George. Thank you, everyone. Let's move on to our next issue for the day, and that is selecting the topic for next time. So any topic that you'd like to suggest, please go ahead. You can suggest more than one topic. I'll write down all the topics and then we'll vote on them. You can vote for more than one topic. You can vote for every topic if you like. That's okay. Yes, floor's open for topics, please.
So I don't know. I don't know how to phrase a question, but I want to know what the hell is going on between Canada and USA and the whole political situation. So I don't know how to phrase this. For instance, I called up Costco for I had some issue, and she said, "Oh, you've called US, not Canada." And for a moment, my heart skipped a beat. I thought I've done something like illegal, So she said, "No, I'll just transfer you to the Canadian guy." So I was like, "Okay, we still are friends." It was so weird.
That's the star of dystopia, when you can't even phone up Costco, and that's good.
I want to know what the hell's going on, and if someone can phrase this,
Right.
that'll be my topic of choice.
Any other suggestions? Denise, you had a couple of suggestions in the beginning.
Yeah. So I was thinking of three. The pandemic of loneliness, just backing on to the pandemic that we experienced 5 years ago. Longevity. And what is happiness? Or how to define happiness.
Okay. Anyone else? Drake?
Should we strive to become a multiplanetary species?
Okay. Simon, you had something?
I'll change my study. What are the boundaries of war?
Boundaries of war. So one suggestion from my side, a topic I'm suggesting is anger.
Vinod, if you don't mind, I'll throw in two, which is, what is freedom? What is freedom?
Okay. We've got a basket full of topics. I'll just go over them again and then we'll vote on each, okay? First topic, Canada, USA. Road ahead. Pandemic of loneliness, second topic. Third topic, longevity. Fourth topic, what is happiness? Or just happiness. Next topic, should we be a multiplanetary species? Next topic, boundaries of war. anger, and last topic, what is freedom? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to call out each topic. And if you would like to vote for that topic, please raise your hand. I'll just count the number of hands. Okay. So first topic, Canada, US. 3. We have 3 votes. The pandemic of loneliness. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, 6 hands, including me. Next topic, longevity. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Again, 6. Happiness. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Should we be a multiplanetary species? 1, 2. Boundaries
Just me and you, Drake.
boundaries of war. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Anger. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Wow. Didn't expect that. Why am I feeling happy that anger? What is freedom? Last topic. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Is your hand up, Tulip? 7. Okay, so we have a tie. 2 topics. We'll vote again on them. Topic 1 is anger. Topic 2 is what is freedom. So let's go. Anger. Votes for anger, please. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, anger has come down to 4. What is freedom? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Wow. Okay, topic for next time is what is freedom?
Did that make you angry, Vinod?
Freedom from his anger.
Oh, that was a lovely session. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
See you soon.
And this was much. I felt nicer compared to the last time. It was like more. There's more familiarity, and it's been fun. Thank you.
Yeah, we're slowly getting comfortable.
On that.
I had a couple of questions before we pack up. The first was a suggestion. I think it was David or someone asked, why don't we do the video podcast? Is everyone here okay with the video coming up on YouTube or somewhere?
Sure.
Yeah.
Anyone who's not comfy with it?
I'm sitting in the middle of the road. I think I was just wondering, kind of almost idly, Vinod. So your call, neither for nor against.
No, I was just exploring everyone's views. And next topic, last thing was about your introductions. So if you'd like, just record an introduction the way you'd like and send it across. If you can do it as video, that'll be great. I can put up the videos. If you want to do it as audio, you can do audio also. And if you'd like to do it as an interview, just let me know. I'll interview you and do the introduction that way, any which way you like. Okay, I guess that's it from here. Anyone, any comments, suggestions, feedback? Yes, you.
No, good night, everyone. I'm just saying bye.
Thank you, everybody.
You know,
Night.
All right. Bye-bye.